All right, today we're diving into the one thing that holds the entire World Wide Web together, HTML. You've probably heard of it, but what is it really? Well, it's the blueprint, the skeleton, the absolute foundation of literally everything you see and do online.
So here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll nail down what HTML actually is. Then we'll use this great digital house analogy to make it all stick. After that, we'll get our hands dirty and look at the anatomy of a real web page, talk about why good structure is so important. And finally, we'll see where HTML pops up in some pretty unexpected places.
Okay, let's jump right in. We're going to start with a question, a debate really, that gets to the very core of what HTML is all about.
So, is HTML a programming language? Man, this is a classic debate you'll hear all the time. But it's not just about winning an argument online. The answer is actually the key to understanding HTML's true role in the digital world.
And this right here is the whole ballgame. See, a programming language has logic. It calculates things. It makes decisions. It does stuff. HTML, it doesn't do any of that. It's a markup language. All it does is describe the content. It tells the browser, hey, this chunk of text is a heading, or this is a list. It's all about structure and meaning, not action.
You know, the name itself tells you everything you need to know. Hypertext markup language. Hypertext, that's just a fancy word for the links that weave the web together. And markup language, well, we just covered that. It uses tags to give structure and meaning to the content. Simple as that. It's all right there in the name.
Okay, so now that we've got that down, let's use one of my favorite analogies to see how this all fits together. Because HTML doesn't work in a vacuum. It has two best friends it needs to build anything cool: CSS and JavaScript. Think about building a house. It's the perfect comparison. HTML is the framework. It's the 2x4s, the foundation, the basic structure that gives the house its shape. Without it, you just have a pile of materials. Then comes CSS. CSS is your interior decorator. It's the paint on the walls, the cool furniture, the lighting. It's everything that makes the house look good. And finally, you've got JavaScript. That's the electricity, the plumbing, the doorbell. It's what makes the house interactive and, functional. And this quote from Database just nails it. It's the foundation, the decor, and the moving parts all working together. You absolutely need all three. A house with just a frame isn't livable, right? Same with a website. You need that solid HTML structure before you can make it look good or do anything interesting. All right, the house analogy is great for the big picture. Now let's zoom in. Let's look at the actual blueprint of a web page and see what those essential bones are actually made of. Okay, believe it or not, every single web page you have ever seen is built on these four things. You've got the docutype, which just tells your browser, hey, this is an HTML5 page. Then the HTML tag wraps around everything. And inside that, it's split into two big parts, the head and the body. The head section is like the mission control for the web page. You don't actually see any of this stuff on the page itself, but it's full of critical instructions for the browser. It's where you define the character set so your emojis and symbols show up right, where you set the little title that appears in the browser tab, and crucially, where you tell the page how to adapt to look good on a phone. So we know the basic structure now, but why is it so important to get that structure right? This next part is huge because it's not just about writing clean code. It's about building a web that works for absolutely everyone. And that brings us to this really powerful idea called semantic HTML. It sounds complicated, but the concept is super simple. Just use the right tag for the right job. If something is a main title, use a heading tag. If it's a list of items, use a list tag. This gives your content meaning that computers can understand. Here's a perfect example. You could totally take a generic box, a div tag, and use a bunch of styling to make it look like a button. But to a screen reader, for someone who's visually impaired, it's just a box. But if you use the proper button tag, you're telling the browser and any other technology, this isn't just a box. This is an interactive button. And you get all that buttony behavior for free. So what's the big deal? Why does this matter so much? Well, three big reasons. First, and most importantly, accessibility. A real button just works with keyboards and screen readers right out of the box. Second, it makes life easier for developers because you're not reinventing the wheel. And third, it's a huge boost for SEO.
Search engines like Google can understand your page way better when the structure makes sense. And you don't have to take my word for it. This quote from the Mozilla Developer Network, they're kind of the experts, hits the nail on the head. So much of making the web accessible just comes down to using the right HTML elements for the right purpose. It's one of the simplest, yet most powerful things a web creator can do. Okay, so HTML is the blueprint for pages. Got it. But modern HTML, or HTML5, can do so much more than just lay out text and images. Let's wrap up by looking at a few surprising places you'll find HTML at work in the wild. Okay, first, the obvious one. Web page development. It's the backbone of something like 95% of the entire internet. It is truly the universal language of the web. But here's one that might surprise you. Game development. Yeah, really. The HTML5 canvas element is basically a drawing board that lets developers create some pretty sophisticated 2D games and graphics that run directly in your browser. No extra plugins needed. It doesn't stop there. Modern HTML is so powerful, it can even let web apps work when you're completely offline. It has features that let an app store data right in your browser, so you can keep using it even if your internet connection drops. And think about something we do every day, filling out forms online. HTML has evolved here too. It now has advanced controls with built-in error checking and new input types like calendars and color pickers, making the whole process of data entry way smarter and less annoying. It's pretty incredible to see what HTML can do today, from games to offline apps, especially when you remember it all started way back in 1991. Tim Berners-Lee created this relatively simple language to share documents. And from that spark, it has just grown and evolved into the complex, interactive web that we basically can't live without today. So let's just quickly recap the big ideas. HTML's job is to give web content its structure, period. It's a markup language, not a programming one. That's a key distinction. The house analogy is your best friend for remembering how it works with CSS and JavaScript. And, most importantly, using good semantic HTML is absolutely vital for making a better, more accessible web for everyone.
And I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. In a world that's rushing towards AI and no-code tools that build websites for you, does that make understanding the foundation, good, solid, semantic HTML, more important than ever? Or less? Something to think about. Thanks for tuning in to this explainer.